This is a demonstration of the tracing type exercise. You're going to need to print out the tracing type form before you even start so that you can see what you're actually supposed to be looking for. We're looking for sophisticated fancy, Wild West roughing it, scary grunge, playful childlike, and Middle East adventure. And what we're trying to do is find type that kind of has the feeling or the vernacular, which I talked about in the lecture, the vernacular for that particular feeling, okay? What does Wild West or roughing it type look like, okay? And so what we're going to do is you need to find examples of type. Now, it may be challenging for some of you. I just happen to have magazines and such where I can have all sorts of wonderful things, like this one from the Wall Street Journal that has lots of different stuff in it. Most of it, admittedly, is kind of what I would consider fancy formal, but there's some fun, childlike, playful stuff in here too. Now, for those of you who don't have any printed materials at home, you're going to have to go ahead and hunt down something on the internet. The challenge is, when you finish this exercise, you need these to be, this is kind of an example of a finished one here. I'll put this on here too. It needs to occupy the space. We don't want a tiny little chunk of type stuck in the middle of this thing, and we kind of want to be able to read the majority of the word. So even though a lot of glow is cut off in this example, we still know that it says glow, okay? Mo, even though it's only 2 letters, is really occupying this space fairly well, and it was my grunge example. Whereas this Kimber, it's occupying the space. It has a little bit too much room on the top or bottom, but that's okay. Is a Middle Eastern adventure kind of typeface vernacular there, okay? And so what you're going to be doing is considering how it's going to occupy this particular rectangle, because you're going to end up, after you trace them and marker them up with a black marker, you're going to end up cutting them out so that the rectangle fits inside of these little spaces here, and then gluing them on. Okay, now for gluing them on, I would recommend very timid amounts of spray mount or something like that. Or if you have that double-sided tape, that would work okay too. But the last thing we want is big clear tape stuck all over this thing. A glue stick is not going to work, okay? Rubber cement is not going to work. You're probably going to need some spray mount or some double-sided tape. I really like the double-sided tape because it's nearly invisible and it's very, very sticky. The problem is you can't lift it back up. With spray mount, you can continue to reposition it. That's why it's called repositionable adhesive. So it can be really, really kind of handy. So let's go ahead and get to the demonstration here. So what I'm looking for, and I happen to have Sailing Magazine here too, is if I'm looking at something like this, you know, is that playful, childlike? It's got kind of a humanistic quality because it looks like it was done with a pen. And you're kind of hunting through and trying to find some things. I'm just going to go ahead and bail out. Although, hey, look at this. This boat has a furler. Does yours? So, thinking about it, yeah, that could occupy the space okay. And that has a kind of fun, playful, childlike quality to it. So I'm going to take a blank piece of tracing paper, okay? And what I'm going to do first, though, is I'm actually going to mark this rectangle on this piece of tracing paper very, very lightly. You don't want it to be very dark because you're going to end up having to erase it or cut on the inside of that line. So I'm going to grab my ruler, because anytime you're drawing a straight line, you should use a straight edge, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create this rectangle, and hopefully I will not make too much of a mess. This would have been a little easier for you to ask questions if we were actually doing this in the classroom, which is what we normally do, but here we are. And this is what the new reality. Okay, so I made this nice little rectangle. There it goes. Good to go. So I can put this sheet over here. I really don't need it for what I'm doing right now. Okay, So this is playful, and what I want to do is get the majority of the words. And even if I were to cut it off right there, a majority of it. So I'm going to ignore this stuff here because I don't want this weird bump being down here. But something saying like this boat as a furl, hey, that's fine. That'll work. Okay. And then what you're going to do is you're going to trace this type very carefully, very slowly. Don't try to do this fast. Okay. This class is about craft. Taking time to do things, not being in a hurry. Okay? Quality doesn't get done quickly. Quality takes time. And so I'm going to sit here and I'm going to trace all of these letters. There's a lot of letters here. So what I may do is pause the video until I finish tracing these letters. Okay, so I've got it mostly outlined. You really can't see it very well, but there it is. Okay, I put this underneath it. Now, tracing paper is very, very strong. It's very good at resisting ink. And so on your list of supplies, I had a bunch of different black line pens. This is a really fat one. Okay, and a Sharpie will work as well, depending upon how good you are at being accurate. And what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and fill it in using a black marker. Now, I'm not going to fill this whole thing in for this exercise because you'll get the idea of what we're trying to do. Okay, so you carefully go through and make sure that you have nice, thick black lines. Really fill it in depending upon what kind of font you happen to be using. Okay, now you can do it that way, or you can do the reverse of that. So the reverse of that would be, I'm going to fill in all the space except for where the letters are. Okay, so you could also do it this way, where you're going to go ahead and fill this in. Now that's going to take a lot more time, but it's going to give you a very, very different feel to this particular project. Okay, so that is an option if you so choose. Maybe you're feeling really, really bored and you want to go ahead and do that, or you want to go ahead and see what the type's going to look like when it's reversed. And that's what we call this. We call this reversed type. Okay, I'm not going to go any further than this because you kind of get the idea of what I'm trying to do. All right, you guys get that? All right. So after you've blackened it and done all that stuff, now, tracing paper, because it doesn't absorb, is very easy to smear. Okay, so be sure your hands are clean and let the marker dry before you try to go on to the next step. So the next step is actually going to be cutting it out. Now, what I want you to get in the habit of, because next year when you're in the second year program, I'm going to hammer you with this, is that you don't use scissors. Okay, what do I use scissors for? I use scissors to cut fabric and string and things like that. I use the big chopper when I'm just trying to do a rough cut to an 8.5 by 11 or some page thing like that. But I'm certainly not going to try to cut mat board with it. Okay, you need a utility knife or a mat board cutter for that. Or I'm going to use a knife. This one happens to actually be a field knife, but it's basically a surgical field knife, so it's very, very sharp edge. And I'm using a large cork-backed ruler. Okay, so you've cut it out, and you may end up having to erase some lines depending. Okay, but remember, the black ink is very, very sensitive when it's on tracing paper. All right. So this is the point where you would take some spray adhesive and put it on the back of this thing. Or, you'd put your double stick tape stuff on the back side of that thing, and then you would go ahead and stick it down. So this would be my childlike one. Okay, so I would stick it down here. It's interesting because evidently this one was bigger, because you'll notice it is the right size for the one that I used. I don't know why this other sample is bigger. I must have redone it or something like that. Okay, and then after you've done all 6 of them, you will take it and put it on your scanner or take a good picture of it and go ahead and post it. And then I will be able to grade it. And remember, this is about craft, so take your time, go slow. It's going to be due by Sunday, which is April 12th to you guys. So have a great day. Hope you had a decent weekend, and welcome to typography.